direct from the Pacific Northwest.
Representando a todos los Alvis en los Estados Unidos con Dro Breeze.
You are listening to,
you already know,
the DroInTheKnow podcast with your host,
the one and only
Dro Breeze.
Happy New Week, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of the DroInTheKnow podcast. As always, I'm your host, Dro Breeze, for the week. Once again, giving a big shout out to all the supporters who have been tuning in on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other digital platforms, and now also available and streaming on YouTube. So make sure to search me up under DroInTheKnow podcast. And remember, it really means a lot. And if you like what you hear, please make sure to hit that subscribe button on your digital platform. It truly would be appreciated. Man, on this week's episode, I'm just really taking things to a whole different level. I hope everybody had a great week. But, you know, I have so many things and a range of topics to discuss. But nothing, and I mean nothing, gets more to me than what I'm about to talk to you about. You know, friends and colleagues always take a pause and give me a quick stare when I mention to them that I grew up in Canada. Yes, it's the truth. Matter of fact, when I tell them that I'm a dual citizen of both the United States and Canada, they just can't seem to get over the fact that they heard Canada and growing up coming out of the same sentence, especially out of my mouth, being a Latino. And of course, you know, after several minutes of trying to explain to them on how this came about, once their realization sets in, it's all fun and games telling you about this experience, but they seem to tend to ask me the same question. And that question is, well, what was it like growing up in Canada being Latino? And I tell them, well, it's actually more complicated than you think. You see, the thing is, we really don't have any representation in Canada. The Latino population of 1 million is nowhere near the 60 million that live out here in the United States legally. This number makes the United States the second biggest Spanish-speaking country and market outside of Mexico alone. Now let that sink in. Just think about it. That's fucking crazy. And as soon as you cross that imaginary line going up north, demographics drastically change. Now, you know, I love all my people. I embrace diversity and I love seeing diversity. I'm not a single-minded person. I grew up that way. And in no way do I think that we should be against diversity and that we should stick to our own. But let's be real. Canada's mostly white. And being a Latino in general makes things more complicated when you're living in Canada. You know, Latinos, we come in different colors. And for the most part, we share the same values, same history, same culture, and religion all throughout the Americas. And when I say Americas, I don't mean the United States of America. I mean Latin America, which includes, you know, the Caribbean, South America, Central America, and even Mexico. Although, you know, with Mexico, they consider themselves part of the North America continent, which we use all references. I mean, we use Central America, North America. It doesn't really matter. But you see, most Canadians don't even understand that. They generalize everyone as being Spanish. And if you really think about it, us Latinos, well, Latino Americans, we're not Spanish. That's a European country, and we really can't relate to that definition. The correct definition that we prefer to use, and you can ask right across the board here, and I'm talking about Latin America in general, because what we really like to refer to ourselves as is Latinos, Latinas, or Hispanics. Now, that's what we really consider ourselves. And there's so much misinformation of our culture that sets in ignorance to a degree in Canadian society. You see, most Canadians can only relate to us from what they see on TV, in sports, or movies. And sexism also plays a role in these stereotypes. For example, most think that our women are just sexual objects who love to dance with thick accents and who are just around for the fun. But our sisters are more than that. We face challenges of stereotype on a daily basis. We face racism on a daily basis. It just never makes the news. And for example, in Vancouver, growing up for many years, especially in my early teens and 20s, I can't even count on how many times Canadian police harassed me for just looking a certain way. I was a young Latino who never committed a crime, yet in their eyes, they made me feel as if I were some set tripping gangbanger from the MS-13 or some shit. And it really irritated me on how many times I had to try and fight so hard to clear that image. And no young minority in Canada should ever have to feel that way. That's just my opinion. And I'm pretty sure many agree with me. It's as if society pushes our youth, especially our minority youth, to accept a certain stereotype. And that is wrong. Like, I remember when I would dress up in a suit going to an interview, there was always a little passive comment from people, joking around saying that, hey, you kind of look like a cartel member. Well, these are my experiences, and many and some can't relate to that. And if I were to have a thick accent, well, most likely I would have been labeled as a, illegal immigrant from Mexico. But here's the fact. I'm none of those things. I'm not even Mexican. I'm a descendant of Salvadoran ancestry. But like many, and I know a lot of Latinos can relate to this, especially who are listening up in Canada, whether you're Dominican, Colombian, or Chilean, and the list goes on, unfortunately, Latinos who fall victim to these stereotypes in Canada, well, very few actually push back. Sadly, a big majority tend to either walk away or reject to accept that this is a big problem in our communities up north. Now, this is not just a Latino issue. We are all just one of many minority groups who deal with this nonsense in different ways. At an early age going to school in Canada, they really taught us that we were not anything alike our counterparts in the United States, which is a big lie in my opinion. They also made us feel that we were just all kumbaya and just getting along and there was no flaws in the country, which is also a big lie in my opinion. So take a moment and do a research on Canadian history. Look on how they treated Indigenous children in residential schools, or look at how they treated Black Canadians out in the Atlantic. Even look at how they treated Chinese and Sikhs in BC out in the early 1800s or late 1800s, sorry. And even as of recent, with the COVID pandemic happening, just look at the increase of anti-Asian hate crimes going around cities like Vancouver, Toronto, the list goes on. It's sad. If countries don't know their past, they will repeat it. These feelings and grudges haven't been resolved. When you have about 400 million citizens living south of you, it is very easy to point fingers at the American perspective and have the world tune you out of your own flaws. Yes, Canada, there is a problem. And I can't ignore also the pros as well. I mean, I'm not going to take that away. It's a clean country, beautiful, safe, amazing wildlife, amazing metropolitan cities such as, look at Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and great restaurants and food. Even ask people abroad and they will tell you the same things I'm telling you. Canada will always be home to my heart. But I have to put a spotlight on the issues because enough is enough. We can do better. And I found the best person to come on and to talk about it. My next guest is on the executive panel for the Anti-Racism Coalition up in Vancouver, Canada, also known as the ARC Vancouver. It's with great pleasure to welcome the chairperson, Kamika Williams. Thanks for taking the time and joining me on this podcast, Kamika.
Thanks for inviting me.
Anytime. So how you been holding up throughout the year? I know it's been a long ride, hasn't it?
Up and down, obviously with COVID, obviously with the protests and whatnot. It's been kind of a rough year up and down, but a lot of highlights, a lot of lowlights, but, just keep it on.
No, I completely understand. And, just to the audience out there, many are not aware that before you became involved with the ARC, we actually both shortly worked together out in the Vancouver area up in Canada back in the early mid-2000s, I would say.
I know. I can't believe that. Like over 10 years ago, 10, 11 years ago. It's crazy.
God, can you believe that? Time flies, doesn't it? But you know what? It doesn't shock me at all that you became involved with this organization because, both you and I, being visible minorities, have had our fair share of racism, especially in the workplace environment, especially where we were working
Absolutely.
at. And it boggles my mind that somehow Canada always gets away without, being called out for its racism. At least the many times that I've encountered it, it's always been very passive but noticeable. And, media always tends to look at the American perspective of things. But, in the United States, in my opinion, at least, it's been very black and white. Racism is very direct, or they really love you for who you are. There's really no middle ground, or at least that's how they make me feel. What are your opinions on that thought? And do you think, racism is is passive up in Canada?
No, I definitely agree with you. I think it's very, swept under the rug. Racism is very kind of hidden. We don't acknowledge it. That kind of stuffy British kind of old attitude, I think a lot of Canadians have. Um, a lot of passive aggressive comments, a lot of
Yeah.
microaggressions, a lot of gaslighting. People will say a joke, no, I was just joking, I was just kidding, it's not a big deal, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I
So
know.
Canada definitely paints itself as a very polite, welcoming society, but there's a lot of racism hidden under the rug. A lot of old white supremacy, white supremacy.
Yeah, I've experienced it. I've lived it. I mean, growing up, I was always second guessing myself in elementary and especially in high school. And certain teachers and colleagues would always throw jokes out there. And in the back of my mind, I would always be like saying, hey, did you really mean that? Or were you just
Hmm.
playing around?
Hmm.
But so what is your story? How did you get involved with the ARC?
Yeah, so last summer when the protests were going on, like most of the world over the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, I kind of thought enough was enough. I was getting kind of fed up, and through some forums, I connected with some other people, some other Black people, parents of Black children, other BIPOC individuals, and we decided to form an organization to make some real change in our community in Vancouver. Again, because people have that image that there's not a lot of issues in Canada,
Hmm.
especially for people of color. But obviously, being someone of color from Canada, I know that's not true. So we decided to make some real change in our communities.
Yeah, and you have some really good points, and that's a great start. So, as an organization, what exactly is the ARC's goal and long-term vision at this point?
We definitely help to, we want people to practice anti-racist behavior.
That's a good
We
start.
have a
Yeah.
lot of initiatives because, again, racism is very deep and systemic. It's not just, slurs, racial slurs or saying the N-word at somebody. And it's lack of, history of certain groups in schools, and it's lack of representation in the workplace. And there's so many, it's when you go to a hospital and people of color don't get the same treatment. Racism is so deep and it's so systemic. So we want to see changes like that, not just performative, deep, meaningful changes.
Yeah, it's definitely systemic. I mean, when I recall when I used to live in Canada, I actually had my run-ins with the police, and it wasn't because I was breaking any laws or anything like that. It was just based on, being racially profiled. And I remember telling colleagues and friends about these stories, and the ones that couldn't relate would always think there was an over-exaggeration, and it frustrated me. I mean, how do you deal with this? I mean, did you not encounter this yourself in any way at any time?
Absolutely. Because people don't, I think that's the issue about being, or one of the, the problems with being in like a white community, a white society is that, when you go tell people who don't understand your struggle, who don't know what you go through, it's hard to convince them that there's even a problem. Because again, like they don't see it. They don't see an issue with the little microaggressions and the passive aggressive comments. They do it, their family does it, they've grown up 30, 40 years with people all around them making these comments. And then when you stand up for yourself, you say something, they have all of their white friends who don't think it's an issue standing up for them and validating their opinions. And it's very
Yeah.
frustrating. And that's what I think is the issue, is there's not enough people who look like you in positions of power and authority who can actually do something, who actually want to make change. There's too much time spent trying to validate or try and make them believe that there's even an issue in the first place.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It starts with minorities in position of power that can make a change, and I agree with you. I know for a fact that both you and I used to feel that way a lot in our workplace. I'm not going to say any names, but there were times where certain coworkers would cross that line with some comments, and they felt comfortable, yet you could feel that racism was deeper and passive. But I think that the most important thing to win back is to stand up for yourself, even if that means losing your job, but at least you're letting them know that this is not right, and it plays a long way. And that is the most
Absolutely, yeah.
important way to push. I mean, so if I'm correct, was ARC Vancouver the founders of the Black Shirt Day movement across BC? Is that correct?
That was our initiative. So we actually created Black Shirt Day.
For
So
real,
we were,
that was successful. I saw that on social media, and I saw that a lot of kids and schools and people took part in that. So why don't you give us a little backstory on how that whole process went down? I'm pretty sure that the audience would like to know that you guys were behind that movement for Black Shirt Day and all over BC and Canada.
yeah, we were very excited about Black Shirt Day. Honestly, it came about. We were trying to discuss ways about how to inform the public about Orange Shirt Day, which is an initiative to spread awareness about residential schools in Canada. And then, we came up with this idea, but we saw, we talked about what great things that Pink Shirt Day and Orange Shirt Day have done to spread awareness, especially with youth and children in schools. And we thought, wow, like, the light bulb kind of went off. Black Shirt Day would be a good idea. We initially brought this to the Vancouver School Board. So before we did anything, before we made a petition, we brought it to the Vancouver School Board. We definitely got some pushback. They
Really?
they wanted us to change the date. We also have been receiving some ongoing pushback about the name Black Shirt Day as well, just because it reminds a lot of people of, black shirts, Mussolini, fascism, and whatnot. And obviously, we have to acknowledge that there's a lot of, victims from the Holocaust and victims from Mussolini and fascism who they're still alive today. So obviously, that brings up something traumatic, some
Yeah.
experience, right? So, even reaching out and speaking with members of the Jewish community, certain organizations about how to address that. So that's definitely, one of the challenges as well, one of the hurdles that, we came across in Black Shirt Day as well. A lot of organizations have been working for years to get mandatory Black history in schools. And for whatever reason, the BC government, the Canadian government, they're really dragging their heels. They're not doing much. And we've also attempted to reach out to the Minister of Education, and she hasn't contacted us as well. So it just seems like they put out statements. They say they want to do things. They say they're working with people. They can check the box and say they're doing something, but they're not really doing much. So
I understand where you're coming from. So you haven't heard anything from the provincial government at this point or so far?
not so they released a statement on Black Shirt Day, which we were very excited about because it received such a great reception. So it actually spread across Canada. Actually, people from New Zealand and Germany had, were taking us in their posts on Black Shirt Day. So it was very exciting to see. And I think they felt a lot of
That's
pressure.
awesome.
Yeah, we were very excited about that. So, and with all the supports from almost all the districts in the Lower Mainland and on Vancouver Island, they released a statement, acknowledging Black Shirt Day, and acknowledging the grassroots movement and saying how important it is, saying they need to do more, but they're not actually, doing more, which is unfortunate. So fingers crossed. We'll see.
So if I'm correct here, what exactly is the mission statement for Black Shirt Day? Because I know there's something similar to
Orange Shirt Day.
Yeah, Orange Shirt Day. I know it kind of has the same kind of fight for cause. And what are the differences between the two, or is it kind of pushing for the
For
same
Black
thing?
Shirt Day, you mean?
Yeah, for Black
Or
Shirt Day.
yeah, so there's two things around Black Shirt Day. Well, I guess it's three essentially. The first thing is there's no mandatory curriculum for Black history in Canadian schools, and Black history is Canadian history. So that's
Hmm.
one thing. It's a day to get if we get the Ministry of Education to recognize Black Shirt Day officially, then it's a day at the very least to have mandatory education. So it's kind of a clever way to get mandatory education, at least for one day on Black history as well. It's on the birthday of the great civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. So he's a great international figure. So it's also a day to talk about civil rights, the ongoing civil rights struggle of Black people everywhere, but Black Canadians as well, and also to have discussions around anti-racism, no matter what race or skin color or ethnicity you are. Is to
Yeah.
have that discussion because obviously white supremacy has affected so many different people. Thinking in Canada alone, you have the Kamika Maru, Sikhs, Jewish people. Everybody was really oppressed by the government. So it's a day to have anti-racism discussion as well and have those talks.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so here's a question for you. In your opinion, do you think that Trump politics has influenced white Canadians' way of thinking? I mean, for example, out here in the United States, there are certain people that think that white culture is under attack. Some people think that, it's not okay to be white, and they're starting to push back and, trying to be firm with their mentality and way of thinking. And it always, I tend to think about this that, in Canada, there's certain pockets and, highly populated areas of Caucasian. And I'm just wondering, do you think that they too are starting to push back and trying to think like that, like Trump?
Absolutely. I think, Trumpism has definitely, seeped up into Canada. I have people, an aunt and, a family member who's a MAGA hat wearing Trump supporter. We're no longer Facebook friends. We don't speak anymore. But, I think it definitely has and come up to Canada and affected. There's a lot of outward, racism now, I think, with Trumpism and then people just denying it. And again, like with the gaslighting. And, I saw with the protests, Indigenous protests in support of Wet'suwet'en. about a year ago, just before COVID, you go online and there's just such disparaging, disgusting comments about Indigenous people. And when the coronavirus started, really disgusting, disparaging comments about Asian people. And we saw, a 90-year-old man was pushed to the ground by some, biker kind of dude. I can make assumptions about, what kind of person that is,
Yeah.
but we see, the Proud Boys and people just walking around proudly. There was a post not just within the last 2 weeks about some guy in a white hood walking around in Alberta.
Yeah, that's fucking
Yeah.
crazy. And I know that many are not aware of this, but I heard reports that the founder of the Proud Boys is actually Canadian. Is there any truth to that? Are you aware of any of these reports?
Yeah, he's Canadian, and I think he initially, before he came out as a Proud Boys member or racist or whatever, or maybe he had already, I don't know. I think he was CEO or running Vice News or something like that. Like he was actually
Man, that's some
in control
crazy
of like a
shit.
news outlet. Yeah, it's pretty frightening.
Do you meet a lot of resistance when organizing your events, and has the ARC come across counter protest? I mean, the reason I'm asking is because I see comments on social media and it appears that the All Lives Matter movement has a presence in the province, but I'm actually wondering if they actually do show up to these events or do they voice their opinions out loud?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There's always those all lives matter people, and there's the people who, they just don't want to listen. They say they're open-minded. They say that, I support the movement, but, I think you should do it this way, or I know peaceful protesting. And it's like, well, why can't you be like more like Martin Luther King? It's like, one, he was radical. Two, he had, this method of nonviolence, and he was still murdered because of it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
how peaceful do you want, us to be? And it's always like there's, white people always have some sort of opinion on how people should act and how, this and that, because it's uncomfortable for them. The white fragility, I think, is very apparent
Yeah,
these days.
it's definitely, when you put them on the spot, it really does make them uncomfortable. And that is a very true statement. I mean, if you look at Canadian culture as a whole, especially what we learned in school, yes, it is true. If you compare it to other nations, there is less racism, but it's not a perfect country, and it is existent, especially systematically. I mean, if you look at the list, I mean, when they showcase to the world on what is a perfect Canadian, you got your Wayne Gretzky's and you got all these other Caucasian hockey players. And then the other day I was going through YouTube and, believe it or not, I got a tourism ad from the BC government. And I noticed that every celebrity that they used to promote these videos were of Caucasian background. I mean, and there's minorities that have contributed to Canada, and there are minorities that actually are part of, BC. And it just shocks me because, let's use example, the NBA Finals in the 2019, championship when Toronto Raptors, faced the Golden State Warriors. The organization decided to go with 3 French-Canadian singers over an Ontario native like Tamia, who's a Grammy Award-winning artist. And it just, it just frustrates me to see them passing on all these actors, especially on that Olympic commercial. Back in the days, they had that Olympic commercial, the Gotta Be Here. Do you remember that
I
ad?
can't honestly. I remember remember that song.
Yeah,
But
they use, they use actors like Michael J. Fox and all that, but it just frustrated me to know that there was no minority representation at all, because it's not just,
right?
it's BC's
Yeah,
a bigger
Canada is
place
very
than that.
whitewashed, and that's the problem. It's like they just forget to, they don't want to acknowledge that other people, are here, whether it's in our education system, and that's a big thing. It's just like the lack of acknowledgement that non-white people, exist here. And it's like, excuse me, one, you stole these lands from non-white people. Two, you brought a bunch of non-white people over here to, rape and pillage these lands. It's like, and then you just want to pretend like, oh, you don't exist. You don't want to acknowledge that the contributions that, other people have made to this, this country. It's very
Yeah,
disheartening.
it's sad. Do you predict a bright future at least, or do you think that this will be an ongoing battle for generations to come, especially with everything going on?
I do see a bright future. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this work. I absolutely see a bright future. I think just in general, things have changed. I look at my nephew, and he's, 18 years old. He was born in 2002. And the difference
Whoa,
of,
you just made me feel old just saying that.
I know, right? Well, it's like I was, graduated 2 years later than that, right? So it's,
Yeah.
but how, he grew up and how I grew up, like the thought of having same-sex parents, in the 90s, that was like, would be mind-blowing. People still use the G word and the F word as an insult, right? Fast forward to, my nephew growing up, and it's like he grew up with, people that he went to school with same-sex parents and potentially like transgender parents, and, obviously more, there's, I grew up in Victoria, a very small, predominantly white town. And I've noticed there's more, multicultural, more diversity in Victoria than there was, in the 90s when I grew up. So, I think just in general, our world is becoming, more open-minded, more diverse in so many different aspects. And I'm
Yeah,
very hopeful.
definitely more open-minded. I mean, yeah, like you were saying, I mean, I remember when I was a kid in the 90s, things were so different. Like
Mhm.
certain things are just not, I mean, you know what I'm talking about. It was just different times, right? Even with music and everything, it was just, you know, certain things you were able to get away with. Now it's like, you know what I mean? You don't want
I
to,
know.
sorry, you have something to
Totally.
say?
Like it's weird. I listen. I watch shows. I watch old series and I listen to old music. I'm like, oh my goodness! Like it almost makes me uncomfortable to think like I grew up with this and I thought it was okay. Even it's weird. Like I think I was watching old episodes of like Saved by the Bell or something, and the way they talk about like nerds and girls and it's like a high school show. I'm like, it's actually really inappropriate. And it really shapes the way like you think about yourself and the way you view the world. It was very interesting. Like, yeah, this isn't appropriate to watch.
Yeah. No doubt. So do you guys have any future events happening right now? I mean, are you guys finding a lot of hardships, especially with the whole COVID and the restrictions of gathering and everything like that?
Yeah, and that's part of the issue for us is we really like to attend protests and rallies and hold events and kind of get to know people and get to know our community and be face to face with people. So COVID has been a bit of an issue in trying how do we do that our meaningful work but online. We do have some events. We want to have a conference. I'm not sure if we're hoping to plan a conference for March 20th, 21st for United Nations. I believe it's
Oh wow.
International Day Against Anti-Apartheid and Racism, or race. Sorry, I'm getting the words all mixed up.
No worries.
And then we also have it on June 27th is Multiculturalism Day, so we want to have an event on that day as well. And then just working towards Black Shirt Day 2022.
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely try my best to be up there and be part of that in some way, shape, or form, right? And if people want to join or actually want to get involved with your organization, is there anything that they can find where they can find you on social media or a website where they can check you out?
Absolutely. So our social media, Instagram and Facebook is arc.Vancouver. And our website is antiracismcoalition.org. So you can catch us
Okay.
there.
Do you guys also have a Twitter or YouTube channel as well, or
We
just
do have Twitter as well, arc.Vancouver, yeah, Twitter, and email arcvancity@gmail.com if you want to reach out to us as well.
okay? Well, first of all, I want to say that what you guys are doing is great in my opinion. I'm very proud that you have stepped it up to the plate to confront these challenges in the city and province. Minorities need a voice. I definitely know that firsthand. I mean, especially growing up as Latino in Canada, I was always racially profiled, just for looking a certain way. I mean, they thought I was a gangbanger or cartel related person, and it got really annoying and very disruptive because, when you're trying to move forward, they keep you back, or at least they try to. But I want to thank you, at least on my behalf, for fighting for a better tomorrow for the new generation of kids that are minority in the province. And I, once again, thank you for coming on to this podcast. I wish you and the ARC the very best. And please let me know if there's anything I can do.
Thank you so much. And thanks for having me on your show and, giving me the opportunity to talk about ARC and the work that we're doing. So any chance to spread awareness is great. So thank you.
Yeah, anytime. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is Kamika Williams with the ARC Vancouver. If you want to do any follow-ups, you can check those links that she provided. Once again, I want to thank you guys for listening to this podcast. I will be back with a new episode next week, so please stay tuned. I want everybody to sit back, relax, enjoy the show. I hope you guys have a safe week, and make sure to hit subscribe. Anyways, thanks for listening to DroInTheKnow. Take care. Peace, y'all.
Direct from the Pacific Northwest.
Representando a todos los Alvis en los Estados Unidos con Dro Breeze.
You are listening to
You Already Know,
the Dro in the Know podcast with your host,
the one and only
Dro Breeze.